It is so good to see all of you in here tonight. This is what a great group. And as we, I would like to take just one quick second. I don't normally do this but just we've got such a good group. If you would just very quickly, as I go around, just say your first name and maybe one thing that you would find interesting about yourself or that you think the person next to you does not know, okay? All right, I tell you what, if you don't want to do that, then just where you're from, originally, okay? Is that better? I don't want Hazel upset with me, so okay, we start with Francis.
Hi, I'm Vicki, and I was born in Opelika, Alabama, and you only know where that is if you're an Auburn fan. So where are you?
No, Roll Tide.
Oh.
Yes, I was raised in Montgomery. Yeah, Opelika? Yeah. Oh, an Alabama girl. I knew. That's awesome. Welcome. Well, we're delighted to all of you, and I'm just delighted to have you for this Bible study. This is one that is near and dear to my heart, and as we get into it, I think you'll understand exactly why I say that. The other two, some of you have taken both of my other Bible studies that I've done, Threads from Heaven and The House, which is on the Tabernacle and Temple. And both of those Bible studies are mainly about an overarching theme, and you build from one lesson to the other, to the next. This particular Bible study is going to be on an overall theme. It's going to be on the theme of God's love. But every session is going to be a standalone, every chapter in the book will be a standalone lesson or a standalone chapter. I'm not telling you that so you can, skip 2 or 3. I'm just saying that what we will do in this particular study is to look at 1 or 2 verses each week in depth, and we'll do what I love to do, which is study the history of the times, the history of the context of the verses, what they mean, or the social aspects of it, or how they thought about a certain thing during Bible times. Then we'll apply that to the text, see how that overlaps, just like a template, how it overlaps with the passage, the verse or the verses. And then we will pull out from that what they might be speaking to us in a digital, high-tech, Instagram, Twitter type world. And so what God is saying then and now doesn't change. Our vernacular changes and some of the things and it helps so much to go back and look at that history. Miss Daisy, come on in. This is Daisy Grillo, and she's going to be the furthest away because she's from Rio. Daisy is one of our interpreters that we use on our mission trips when we go to Brazil. She and I have walked many, many dusty streets together witnessing. Come on in. Good to see you. So glad you made it safely back. We're just now getting started. So that is really going to be what we're going to do. And later on tonight, I'm going to tell you some of the passages that we're going to be looking at. But on this first introductory evening, what I like to do when I first get started is to share with my class how the idea came to me, or how I thought about writing on what I was writing. And about a year or so ago, I was watching a sermon series on TV, and I really can't even remember who it was. It may have been Charles Stanley, it may have been someone else. I love the 3 R's, reading, writing, and research. And so I spend most of my time doing some part of that all the time. And but I was watching this sermon, and the minister was talking about John 3:16. And of course, that's probably the most familiar of all the Bible verses to Christians and to non-Christians. And as he was talking, he started the verse and he said, "For God so loved the world," and he stopped. And I can't remember if he got off on something else, or he was talking about some other part, some other aspect. But because he stopped at the end of that phrase, I can't exactly tell you. It's the thing that happens sometimes when you hear Bible verses or you are reading your Bible, and a phrase or a verse that you have read all your life suddenly pierces you in a way that is so profound and so different from how you have ever heard it. And I just sat there. I didn't hear another thing that he said. And all I could think of was, for God so loved the world. And it just made me start to think, what kind of love does it take to love this world in its entirety? Because the beginning of that verse does not say, for God so loved the good people in the world, or the good that is happening, or those that love me. It simply says, for God so loved the world. So tonight we're going to look at a little bit of that phrase, and then we'll look at the rest of the consequences of that verse later on in our course. But that really was where I got to thinking. I started thinking about God's love, and I thought, I think I would love to write my next Bible study on that. And then as I started thinking through God loving the world, I thought, well, what would be some of the aspects of His love that maybe we don't normally think about? Like, for example, the lesson we're going to do next week is from Jeremiah. 2 little verses that have become just so important to me. I just cling to them. And they talk about God's commitment. Now, why would that be important in talking about His love? Because love without commitment doesn't mean a lot. Toni Morrison, who is a very well-known black author, has won the Nobel Prize, fabulous writer. She once had one of her characters in a vernacular voice say, love is or it ain't. Then love ain't no love at all. And that is so true. And so the love that God has for us then, when we know what the commitment is behind that, then it enlarges our understanding of His love for us. And so there are various aspects, and we're going to go through, and I will use the very same method that we have used in the other 2 Bible studies. We will look at what the history of something is. We will seek to understand what it meant to the person reading that passage during ancient times. It's fabulous. I mean, you're going to like this. We're going to have one lesson one night that's going to be a culinary lesson. And no, I'm serious. We're going to have some foods here, and we're going to talk about the importance of those and what that meant, and how then does that relate to the passage. It's very interesting. There's some wonderful things. On 2 lessons, we will be looking at a comparative study. We'll do that on the culinary lesson, the one on bread, fish, and eggs. We'll look at 2 different passages, and then the very last lesson I'm going to do on some aspects of the crucifixion. We'll be leading up to Easter and preparing our hearts for Easter. So we'll talk about the veil and some of that, and then a little of the thief on the cross. Okay, there were 2 men that were crucified, one on one side, each side of Jesus, and we're going to talk about one of the thieves on the cross. So that will be the last lesson that we'll have. So it's going to be exciting. I think you'll like it. And in a minute, I'm going to go through and tell you a little bit of the other lessons that we're going to do. But so a year ago, I am thinking about this, and I'm beginning to prepare, and I'm beginning to do my research, and I'm beginning to go through and see what passages might have a wonderful historical meaning that we could study and pull out and then apply to the passage. And I thought, boy, this is great. This whole idea of God's love for mankind. Okay? And then this little incident happened, and I'll share it with you. And I think there were 2 or 3 of you at my house the day that this happened. Okay, I see Susie grinning, so I think she was there this day. I began when my husband and I downsized about a year ago, and so we just dedicated our house to the Lord, and I said, Lord, you know, I'd love to have people in, and so I began having for the neighborhood and then for others that I knew what I call prayer and share brunches. So good to see you. And on this particular time, I'd already had about 3 or 4. On this particular Saturday morning, I had about 40 ladies signed up, maybe 42 signed up to come. And they were so excited. Many of them had been there before, and they knew kind of how we did. And we have a prayer time, we eat together, and we share, and it's just a wonderful. Mostly the youngest that I've had there has been about 20, and then all the way up. So it's a wonderful mix of ladies, and I love that kind of group. I love the different ages, and I just think that makes for a dynamic that you can't get any other way. Okay, 42 people had committed to come. On Friday night, now I've never had this happen before, in all the times that I've had my prayer and share brunches. On Friday night, beginning about 6 o'clock, my phone did not stop ringing. My email, my text kept coming into my phone, and I thought I had 20 cancellations. All legitimate. I mean, these were things like, I can't believe it, but my in-laws are suddenly coming in from out of town, and there's no way I can get there, and I've got sick children, and I mean, it was just incredible. Well, by Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, and everybody was supposed to be there at 10, I turned to my husband and I said, the Lord is up to something. This is just the craziest thing that I've ever experienced. So 10 o'clock comes, and I still had a good group. I had 18 or 20 ladies there. And so we had our nice little brunch together, and we began our prayer and share time. And let me add one more thing. Each time I asked a woman to share a personal testimony. And I had asked someone here in our church that is very, very well known. She's a wonderful Bible teacher, and so is her husband. And so I asked her to share. And she shared a very personal experience that most everyone in the room, even though we all knew her, had really never heard before. A very profound, difficult experience that she and her husband had together. We were all could not believe it. It just touched us all so. The depth of that, the difficulty of it, how God had seen her through that situation. And among the 20 that showed up was a young woman that had only been in one of my classes a couple of times. I didn't know her very well, in her 20s. And as things would go, when this woman finished her testimony and we began going around the room to share a prayer request or whatever, it happened that this young woman was the last to share. So everybody shared a prayer request, and we had a wonderful time of sharing, and it got to this young woman. And when she opened her mouth to begin to speak, she began to weep. And she wept, and she wept. And she poured her heart out to the rest of us. It was just one of those moments. And, of course, none of us had any idea the severity of the things that she was living with and trying to deal with, her challenges and her difficulties. And we simply surrounded her. We put our arms around her. We prayed over her. It became the most wonderful time of just loving on her. And then about noon, which is what time it was over, everybody began to leave, and it turned out that she asked me, she and one other young woman asked if they could stay. Now, my husband is almost always at home on Saturday afternoon, especially if there's a golf game or a football game or something on TV. But it happened that his son was visiting from Tampa, and they were out golfing. So there was no one in the house except myself after all the other ladies had left, and this young woman and a friend, her friend. She stayed for another nearly 3 hours. And I got to fully present Scripture to her. I got to share the love of God with her, the love of Jesus, what He really wanted to do in her life. It was just became the most incredible time of loving and sharing. She left, I guess, probably around 5 o'clock. And my husband and his son had decided to play a second 18 holes. So they didn't get home until 7. So after she left, I had the house all to myself. It was so quiet, and I needed that time. And I just sat in my husband's big recliner and just tried to think through the day. It had been a very emotional day, a very important day in a lot of ways. And as I was beginning to pray and to think about it, I began to sort of become aware in my mind that maybe that whole day had been orchestrated for this one young woman, this one person. And I thought, well, you know, if the crowd had been huge, we may not have had that opportunity, you know, to go around and have such, and she may have felt intimidated. As it was more an intimate kind of thing. And I sat there, and as I was praying about it, I said, well, Lord, is that in fact what you did today? Is that what happened today? And there was just this silence. And in a moment, I sensed, not that you could hear, but in my heart and in my mind, I sensed God saying to me this: you do not understand how extravagant my love is, even for one person. It so pierced me. I just had to sit and let that wash over me for a moment, many minutes. And I thought, you know, Lord, that is how you feel about each of us. For God so loved the world, but He also loves each one with this extravagant kind of love. He said to me, you do not understand how extravagant my love is. That I'll orchestrate anything in order to show one person that clearly, with clarity. I'd do whatever it takes to come into someone's mind and into someone's heart and to let them sense and feel and understand and have a touch of my extravagant love. So I thought, that's what I want to write about, Lord. If you'll just help me convey, help me study, read these passages, and help me then convey to a class and to the people reading, to the people attending. This extravagant love. And so as I began to think through on titles, I'm going to title this one Extravagance Unveiled. That's why the last lesson we're going to talk about the veil and what that means when that veil was ripped open, torn open. Okay? Extravagance unveiled. Well, what does the word extravagant mean? What really does extravagance mean? Here's what the dictionary says about extravagant. It says exceeding the limits of reason or necessity, lacking in moderation, lacking in balance, lacking in restraint. It is extremely or excessively elaborate. It's spending much more than necessary. It's profuse. It's unreasonably high in cost. Extravagant is exorbitant. It's given to or marked by unrestrained abundance. It is lavish. Well, that's His love. That's the definition of His love for all mankind and for each one. For all and for one. You remember somebody said one time, and you probably have heard this little phrase, it hit me so, I heard it first as a brand new Christian. Some of you know that I didn't become a Christian until I was 30. Went through some really rough times. But not long after I became a Christian, I remember a Sunday school teacher saying, God loves each of us as if there were only one of us. What a neat thought. I understand the sense of that, much more so now than I ever did before.